Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Geography webinar series where we showcase geographic undertakings of our fellow geographers, or in this case, geography adjacent scholars and allies. This event is sponsored by the UP Department of Geography and in partnership with the Philippine Geographical Society. I am Joseph Palis and I will be the moderator for this webinar. Just a few reminders before we proceed. To avoid unnecessary background noise, we kindly keep your microphones on mute during the presentation. We encourage you to interact by using the reactions button, or you can also type your comments and questions in the chat box. We will address them during the open forum. This lecture series is being simultaneously streamed in the UP Department of Geography YouTube channel. Also, please note that this meeting is being recorded and the recording of this webinar will be posted in the YouTube channel later. Before I introduce our speaker for this webinar, let me share with you the word cloud we have generated from your registration keywords. As you can see, dominant words include home, lakes, makiling, extravagant, enchanted kingdom, mountains, among others. We will find out later if indeed these keywords will form part of this afternoon's lecture. Our speaker is Alvin Pawilen. He's an assistant professor of the Division of History, Department of Social Sciences at UPLB. He finished his undergrad degree in social sciences, major in social anthropology and psychology, cum laude at the UP Baguio. He also obtained his MA in Philippine Studies from the Asian Center at UP Diliman and is currently taking his PhD in history with cognate in geography from the same university, that's UP Diliman. His research interests include social and cultural history, martial arts, intercultural interaction, and heritage. Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce to you Assistant Professor Alvin Pawilen.
Magandang gabi po sa ating lahat. Maraming salamat po sa paanyaya ni Dr. Joseph Palis at ng Philippine Geographical Society. At maraming salamat din sa lahat na nagka-interest sa topic at talk na ito para ngayong gabi. First, I would like to apologize for code switching every now and then kasi parang ito yung mas relax kong paraan, no? Para mag-deliver ng ganitong lectures. Tapos, let me also read from my script para hindi masyadong humaba o lumawak yung ating topic, yung ating discussion, at mapag-focus tayo doon sa sharing, kumbaga, at the end. No? Okay. In my abstract, I describe the paper as my attempt to weave or mold part of my background and interest in social anthropology, cultural history, and cultural geography. But since these are wide fields of knowledge, I focused on countermapping, folklore, and emotions. So, basically, the presentation is about historical countermapping using folklore or belief and emotions associated with the concept of a house in Laguna during the 1950s. So this is kind of walkthrough kumbaga doon sa aking counter mapping project in one of my courses in PhD. I think that was Geog 226 kung di po ako nagkakamali, no? Okay. So, counter map siya para sa akin kasi una, hindi siya yung typical idea natin ng map na geopolitical. Tapos nakaangkla siya sa konsepto ng house o bahay. And then, Yung design ng bahay is kind of irrelevant kumbaga doon or sa ating study or hindi siya yung focus. The historical data rin is in the form of folklore, okay? And there is the factor of emotions. While folklore is not necessarily history, it can be a source of history. In cultural history, for example, where you want to write about the everyday life and communal meanings of society during a certain period in the past, folklore represents the worldview, okay? How uh, these people, these communities perceive reality. So parang yung folklore yung ginamit nilang way, no, to deliver, to share those knowledge, no. Kaya siguro sa mga nagtatanong na bakit noong 1950s pa, it is more of a technicality of this being part of history. Kung gusto nyo ng recent period, okay lang, no? Okay lang din. But if you are doing history, um, parang napagkasunduan kasi, parang technical lang na idea na dapat 50 years siya, okay? Kailangan may 50-year gap, no? From that period sa present. The emotion part was an added layer since I also adhere to the idea that the home, which the house houses, is an affective space and one of, if not the most emotive of geographical concepts. Having the ideal house means a place of pleasure and comfort. On the other hand, the house can also be a place of power struggle, of politics, and toxic culture, seeping into the private lives and intimate moments of its occupants, thus causing disappointments and frustrations among others. So the first step is, of course, finding sources, and you can check Teknoklatan, which is the digital collections website of the National Library. I encourage the audience to check the said website, then find the historical data Philippines among the list, and you might even check yan, the history and folkways of your own province, municipality, or barangay. Or dito kasi ay baryo pa yung ginagamit. Okay? The 1950s historical data was initiated by former President Elpidio Quirino in order to replace the various historical accounts that were destroyed during World War II in the Philippines. The format consists of two main parts. First, the history of the place, and second, the folkways of the community. It basically acts as a starting point for further research of local history kasi kailangan naman talaga ng corroboration with other sources, especially the historical events. But if you are looking for a ready compilation of historical data or communal memory, no, it is a good place to start. As shown in the screen, nilista ko yung beliefs and practices na may mention ng bahay or specific parts of a house. Hindi ko na sinali dito yung proverbs, songs, and riddles kasi medyo marami na rin yung nakuhang data plus limited nga yung oras ng paggawa ko ng papel. Okay, so examples natin for the whole house in general, children are punished by doing labor in the fields or staying in the house to do household chores. So stairs. After the wedding ceremony, the newlywed couples must race to the top of the stairs of their new home. The first to the top will dominate the relationship. Diba? May ganong power struggle, kumbaga gender roles. Doorways. No one should stay at the doorway when a pregnant woman is in labor. Otherwise, she would have a hard time delivering the baby. No? Okay. Living room. Suitor must not sit down until asked 3 times to show respect to the parents of the girl. Sa bedroom, Do not sit on pillows or cushions to avoid boils or skin irritations and eruptions or yung pigsa, no? Kitchen, ayan, hindi ko nasali dito yung kitchen, no? But later on, may mapakita ulit, no? A girl singing in front of the stove means that she would marry an old widower. Okay? A newborn baby is put near a stove to make her a good cook or orderly housekeeper. Mostly sa babae ito na infant, no? Sa bilang ko, ang pinakamaraming pagbanggit, no, ng beliefs and practices ay sa kusina. Okay? And then followed by the doorways, or pag-combine mo yung stairs and doorways para passageway na lang, no, sa front of the house. Yon ang susunod. And then the house in general, or sa nauna ko kasing paper, kasali pa yung outside, yung yard, so meron ding aspect na marami din sila, no? Okay. Question. Okay, pwede yung sagutin sa chat box, no? Pwedeng sigurong i-share. Kung may taga Laguna or Southern Luzon dito, familiar pa ba kayo sa mga beliefs na ito? Okay. Sa ibang mga lugar, ano naman ang beliefs and practices ninyo? Sa mga nag-check ng HDP report ng kanilang lugar, ano naman yung na-discover nyo? No? Something interesting. Siguro mag-focus tayo sa folkways muna, wag doon sa historical side. No? Again, perhaps if it is allowed, pwede nyo i-share sa chat box. Pwede tayo mag-discuss. No? Some reflections. It is common belief noon sa Laguna na kapag may nanganganak, dapat clear ang doorways at stairs para mas mapadali ang panganak. Kung i-consider natin, para bang anthropomorphic ang dating na may connection ng bahay sa may-ari o nanganganak. Another one, ang lalaki kapag nanligaw, maninilbihan muna yan sa family ng babae by working in the fields or serving in the house. Sa babae, walang ganong version na para bang nagsasabi na ang babae given na, no, dapat marunong yan sa gawaing bahay. Samantala ang lalaki, kailangan niyang patunayan na kaya niyang buhayin yung babae at yung pamilya. So, gender roles are again reflected. Marami ring bawal ang sinasabi ng mga beliefs and practices na ito. And I try to do a sex disaggregated data. Okay? So, ayan sa mga interested on gender topic. Okay? So, frequency yung aking ginamit to color the picture or the graph. No? Female blue, male orange, para maiba naman. Hindi palaging male na lang yung blue. No? So, thinking about it then, the house that is supposed to accommodate positive emotions, positive beliefs, no? Marami ring warnings, threats, and don'ts. Okay. The next steps were to identify the emotions and map them. I think this is the tricky part. First, there was no deliberate mention of any emotion in most of the beliefs, meaning I had to evaluate according to my understanding of the possible main emotion conveyed by the belief or practice. Regarding positionality, hindi ako taga Laguna, and I am looking at a culture that is around 70 years, no, in the past. I also discovered that I can have a different interpretation of one belief or practice every time I revisit the data. Of course, magkakaiba rin tayo ng interpretation and associated emotion sa mga nasabing practices. Isa ito sa mga limitations ng study, but at the same time, it could also be the strength of the countermap dahil lalo nitong hina-highlight yung fluidity na emotions and experiences sa house, no? Therefore, further undermining the idea that the house or the home or the family is a static place of positive energy. Furthermore, siguro dahil gusto ko nang tapusin yung papel, no? Or dahil sa mga hindi sinabi sa folklore, no, na specific emotions, I used generalized categories like positive kapag masaya, yung implied emotion and experience. Negative kung may threat nagko-cause siya ng fear or may masamang event na related dun sa belief, like death, no? Sadness, ganyan. You could say that this could be my mistake, and you are encouraged, no, to specify the emotions or study specific emotions should you do something similar like this. But at the same time, the function of the map remains. The house is portrayed as a place that contains a mixture, no, of varying emotions. So what I will present right now are 5 examples, no, from my original paper. Frequency ang ginamit ko, then I color-coded it. Yellow for neutral, meaning pwedeng positive, negative, or wala lang. Pwede rin wala, ano? Wala yung emotion. Red for negative emotions, mostly negative, like sadness or death, ganyan. Green for positive emotions, excitement, love, kumbaga, or happiness. Blue for beliefs in luck. Okay? Actually, ito pwede ring isama sa neutral eh. Pero naisip ko lang na ihiwalay siya kasi yun nga, mainly pampaswerte, kumbaga yung sinasabi niya or iwas malas. So, I think pwede ring tignan siya separately. Okay. So, ito yung mga 5 sample maps. Naglagay din ako ng listahan ng ilang beliefs and practices na nakaugnay sa kanila without the color para kumbaga kayo naman yung humusga if that particular folkway is positive, negative, neutral, or simply a belief or luck. At most, 3 observation lang ang aking ibabahagi, and then I encourage you to share additional thoughts or folkways, no, from your communities naman dito sa ating chat box. Okay, first is the house in general. Now, in terms of frequency o yung bilang ng pagbanggit ng isang belief or practice, I thought it was mostly negative as there are punishments, there's a lot of do's and don'ts. I think the act of serving somebody else's family can also be something negative, no? Unless, of course, you are more focused on doing the service for love, mga ganyang kaetsasan. Yung buong bahay, it seems, ay tinuturing na physical manifestation ng konsepto rin ng pamilya o tahanan. At may kita natin ang gender roles and expectations towards the family. Yung lalaki, dapat patunayan niyang kaya niyang buhayin ang kanyang pamilya. Tapos, kaya niyang maging haligi talaga ng tahanan, kumbaga. Yung babae naman, interesting yung bawal siyang tumingin pabalik sa kanyang bahay kapag siya ay kinakasal. Dahil una, nakikita natin na siguro patrilocal yung community. Pangalawa, may tuturing siyang symbolism na dapat ang bride nagfo-focus na sa management ng kanyang bagong family at ng kanyang bahay. And interestingly, walang ganitong version para sa mga lalaki. And yung mga bata, pinaparusahan, kinukulong sa bahay at pinapagawa ng household chores. So, do you think yung ganon is still punishment? Okay. Pinag-combine ko na ang stairs and doorways bilang passageway into the house as well as the go-between sa outside public sphere and the inside private experience. No? Nabanggit ko na ito kanina, yung symbolism ng passageways na ito to the act of giving birth na dapat clear ito para mas madali manganak. At syempre, it can also symbolize the occupants going out to the world. You could also focus on the act of giving birth as something positive, no? But ginawa ko siyang negative kasi basically warning siya, no? So, ayun. Same with the race to the top of the stairs during wedding. Kasi dapat masayang event yung wedding. Pero yung goal is about establishing dominance and basically inequality, no, sa relationship. Even death, no, to the last one on top. Interestingly, instead of positive emotions countering the negative ones, the cultural practices and beliefs relied on good luck such as facing the stairs towards the east to welcome the sunshine. Ganyan. The doorway itself is the area of the house with the second most cultural practices or beliefs. No? As we can see, the folkways are relatively balanced between neutral, negative, and positive. And I think it is suitable for such a part of the house, which is the connection of the family to the outside world and vice versa. Almost everything passes in the doorway, and thus a variety of emotions can be felt when someone or something is entering or leaving. Okay, sa living room naman, it is another place inside the house which arguably balances the mixture of emotions. Though in terms of the number of associated beliefs and practices, wala masyadong mention sa living area, which is interesting kasi at least in our standards today, ito yung gathering and interaction, no? The place of gathering and interaction among family members. But when I looked at other sources, yung social life ng mga taga Laguna noong 1950s ay actually nasa bakuran ng bahay. Doon sila nagiinuman, nagkukwentuhan, naglalaro yung mga bata, etc. In some cases, yung living room din ay ginagawang tulugan ng family. Tapos yung bedroom, mostly ay isang stock room or para sa mga bisita. So, going to the bedroom, no? Well, whether it functions as a sleeping quarter for the couple or as a stock room, generally, the bedroom has neutral emotions. May konting bawal, pero yung bawal na yun ay yung paggamit, no? Related doon sa paggamit ng mga punda, ganyan. Bawal para sa bawal na rules, no, para sa mga bata. Walang mention ng beliefs or practices related to sexual activities, no? Hindi naman siguro dahil sa ibang lugar 'yun ginagawa, no? Pero I think it is because that intimate moment, no, ay supposed to be a private matter. So hindi siya masyadong pinag-uusapan when it comes to the folkways. Could be also the bias of the writers, no? Yung mga gumawa nitong paper na ito. Something like a taboo, okay? No, so walang ganong enumeration. And lastly, yung kitchen. Again, sinabi ko pinakamarami to, nakat pa nga yung ating sample na folkways. One possible reason why the kitchen had a lot of practice and beliefs, mostly pertaining to the negative such as warnings, death, etc., is because of the need for orderliness and safety during food preparation and eating. The other part would pertain to gender-related issues as we also do not see the male in much of the activities in the kitchen per the historical data accounts. Para bang sinasabing ang babae ang in charge sa kitchen at dito niya mapapatunayan ang pagiging mabuting asawa o tagapag-manage ng pamilya. Kung meron ng isa from males, ito ay yung implication na malas, kumbaga, sa babae yung mapangasawa, ng isang widower, no? Matandang widower. Okay. Nung nililista ko lang yung data, napansin kong walang mention ang banyo, CR, latrina, palikuran, or the like. So, wala ba silang comfort room sa Laguna noong 1950s? Okay. There are probable explanations. Una, pwedeng sobrang private niya or tabu pag-usapan, no, ang bodily excretions. Kaya hindi siya na-enumerate, okay? Hindi na siya pinapag-usapan sa folkways. Second, going to another source which is the American policies during cholera outbreaks in the 1910s, they noticed that a lot of the native population in general had no latrines. So they instituted policies, no, on building latrines or CRs or comfort rooms, no, which were situated far from the main house. We can also look at the folkways of taking a bath. And kung titingnan yon, ginagawa raw nila ito, okay, in a communal manner in rivers or near an old hand water pump, pitch pump, okay, pitch pump o yung poso, kumbaga. So communal yung paliligo. So ayan, baka may maging interested sa inyo sa cultural historical geography, 'yon, of sanitation in the Philippines. Pwede rin, no? Pwede rin i-check yung folkways, no, vis-a-vis state policies, no? Yung worldview ng community against the perspective, kumbaga, of the state. Okay, so habang binabasa nyo ulit yung sample folkways kanina, or kapag na-access nyo ngayon yung HDP, I encourage you to share your thoughts and relate it to the concept of place among others. So sabi ko nga kanina, yung emotion part, yung mahirap dito kasi yung cultural aspect, we can easily determine and analyze that. You can enumerate that katulad na kanina. So meron ka ng data, no? For one, this could be because of my subjective categorizations of the practices and beliefs. What seems to be negative for me today would probably be something positive and acceptable for the people of Laguna during the 1950s. If we accept, however, that a lot of these beliefs were negative, we can also enumerate at least two reasons. First, the family as the basic social institution had the first responsibility of introducing laws, authority, and the norms of the larger society. Therefore, marami talaga ang do's and don'ts sa bahay pa lang. In the 1950s, nagsisimula ang disiplina sa pamilya at hindi nakasalalay lang sa paralan o simbahan. Pangalawa, kailangang protektahan ng pamilya ang mga miyembro nito, ang kanilang reputasyon at ang kanilang alaala bilang pamilya. Kaya, merong rules and regulations para mapangalagaan ito kahit yung means, okay, could be perceived as negative. I'm not justifying any abuse if there is any, no? I'm just trying to understand or explain them in their form and function as well as in their own context. Okay. At the end of the sharing, I hope nakita natin ang mga sumusunod. Una, yung idea ng counter mapping para sa mga bago pa dito. Pangalawa, yung paggamit ng cultural history through folklore and belief systems to know more about the place-making process of a certain community at a certain point in time. Ang example nga natin ay yung perspective, no, idea na the Lagunenses viewed the house as a physical manifestation of its occupants. The folkways also acted as the connection of the family inside that house to the outside society. Hopefully ay nakukuha kayo ng additional source in the form of the HDP or sa Technoklatan in case you also want to do a historical geography, cultural geography, or geohumanities project. Pangatlo ay ang patuloy na pagsusuri sa mga konsepto ng emosyon at bahay o tahanan o house or home at family, no? At least sa field ng cultural geography. Madalas hindi talaga yung ideal na emotion ang nasa loob ng bahay o tahanan. Nag-iiba-iba din yan sa bawat isa at sa bawat panahon. Yung bahay nga rin mismo ay hindi necessarily yon ang matatawag mong tahanan, and for some people, yung occupants doon ay not necessarily rin their mental or emotional concept of a family. Perhaps your house address is marked on the map, but your home could be found somewhere else. Maraming salamat po ulit sa pakikinig. Magandang gabi po sa ating lahat.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for your wonderful, enlightening, and at least for me, very eye-opening talk. We'll now proceed to the open forum. We encourage you to type in your question in the Zoom chat or in our social media accounts for those watching via YouTube. If you want to personally ask the question, you just use the reaction button to raise your hand and we will acknowledge you. So at this point, if there are any questions or sharing or comments, we'll proceed with that. At salamat, tama. Aside from the Philippine Geographical Society and the UP Department of Geography, this is also co-sponsored by the Folklore Studies program of CSSP UP Diliman. Are there any questions or provocations from the floor? Or doesn't have to be in the floor. It can be remotely in cyberspace. Questions? Meron ba? Siguro pwede ako mag-start, no? As a way of jump-starting this presentation. So, Ryan, may isa ka kaninang tinanong doon na ano ba mga beliefs, no? Mga folkways. Wala naman akong ma-offer na very specific, but I was just thinking that growing up, at least in Negros Occidental and West and Iloilo, sa Bacolod, tsaka sa Iloilo and La Carlota, there were a lot of things that were mentioned about how one acts around the home while we were growing up. Pero hindi na-explain kung bakit. It's just like something that because I said so, no? So yung mga ganung parang unquestioned na mga ginagawa. Pero interestingly, some of those things that you mentioned, I never encountered before. So sa Laguna, considering that my late father actually was raised in Laguna, parang hindi siya nag-figure prominently. Ang nanay ko taga Bicol, so medyo iba ang, siguro mixed din, no? So there might have been some kind of internal negotiation in running the household in a place where we grew up, where we do not have any cousins or relatives, no? Just because it's the decision of my parents to raise their family far away from Bicol and Laguna. So I guess my not really a question, but a comment that it can be very place specific, but growing up in those areas as I mentioned, wala talaga siyang wala akong nakitang common or hindi ko narinig yung mga ibang nasabi, or maybe I did not pay attention sa mga folklore or folkways namin na sinasabi. Siguro wala rin namang scientific basis, pero it would have been important to know why they came in the first place in our consciousness, and how the older people would like to spread them as though it's the gospel truth. So parang wala lang. Yun lang siguro gusto ko lang i-share.
Yes, sir. Ito po ay madalas kong ipinapagawa sa students ko din sa Histuan. Parang pinapa-exercise ko sa kanila. Napapansin ko nga, sir, na kapag ang usapan ay folklore na, specifically the home, yung origins ng lugar, yung mga aswang, ganyan na mga belief, common pa, naintindihan pa ng ibang estudyante, na naririnig pa daw nila na kwento ng lolo nila. Pero I think, when it comes to the home, siguro mas mabilis na nag-change yung folklore. Kasi sabi nga nilang ng ibang estudyante ko rin, hindi na sila nakaka-relate. Ang isa pang nakita ko, sir, na dahilan, at least sa Los Baños, ang daming migrant. Like, doon sa street pa lang namin, akala ko nasa Tagalog region ako, pero Ilocano tong kausap ko, ganyan. So, I think marami din, yun yung interested din ako if ever na study doon, although hindi na siya historical. Yung experiences naman ng culture, ng paano, flow, kumbaga, transfer of culture and identity ng mga migrant parents sa Los Baños, for example pa lang. Kasi ang dami, sir, from Visayan to Ilocano. Same with Quezon, sir, kasi I was looking at historical data rin sa Quezon on typhoons, and I found out na ang dami ring Ilocano at saka Visayan influences and migrants sa Quezon. So, yun. Probably the changes nakaapekto dun sa belief system nila, especially the home. So, yan.
Dagdag ko lang siguro, Ryan, thank you for responding to my comment. Pero dagdag ko lang din, tama talaga, no? A huge factor of it is also migration. For example, alam ko for a fact that in the province where I grew up in Iloilo, malakas yung mga kwento sa aswang, sa mga supernatural, tapos it is made as though it is natural, no, for the people to just talk about it, no. So wala siyang stigma, wala siyang nothing na ganun. Tapos sa ibang areas sa Mindanao, hindi gaano, pero surprisingly, those that have a strong migration pattern coming from people from Western Visayas, or at least Hiligaynon speaking people, sa areas outside of the Hiligaynon speaking regions, ay malakas ang kwento ng aswang. So I was wondering if may kinalaman yon sa mga migrants who perpetuated that kind of practice, no? So interesting din siguro pag-usapan yun, nung how certain beliefs get to be replicated in other areas, and then it seems to have some reference point to the origin place, no? May tanong, may isa dito, basahin ko na lang. May mga folkways pa po ba dyan na sinusunod ngayon, no? I guess it is related more to may mga kasi di ba yung mga maladaptive cultures na pag hindi na siya applicable, hindi na siya ginagamit. Pero I wonder if maybe this is directed for everyone, no? Pero Ryan din, parang may mga folkways pa ba na ginagamit pa rin ngayon, no? At saka usually ano kaya ang basis why they are still being used and reused instead of being discarded, no? Of course, I throw this to everyone to answer, pero Ryan, kung meron ka rin insights.
Siguro yung definition din natin, sir, ng folkways, dapat i-adjust din natin kasi well, the politically correct na nag-evolve na language. Baka kasi yung folkways na inisip natin ngayon, baka naka-incorporate na siya sa religion, for example, no? Like yung or kaya festivities, hindi na siya well, may folklore pa rin na nakalagay kumbaga, pero naka-incorporate na siya sa mga prosesyon, ganyan. To the point na, well, religion na kasi to, so baka hindi na to folklore, yung sa definition natin. I think kung meron mang talagang ano, nag-persist ay yung folklore related to luck, sa kaya rin medyo inilagay ko siya as a separate color, sir. Kasi mas nagpe-persist kumbaga yung mga ganong ideas due to wala namang harm na kapag finalo mo siya o hindi. I mean, swerte kapag gumana ganyan yung ideas. For example, pwedeng naging urban legend na rin yung sa UPLB, yung mga Mariang Banga, yung although yeah, urban legend form, yun na yung style ng folklore. Si Mariang Banga, kapag nakita mo daw si Mariang Banga na nasa paano, hindi kasi yung statwa, sir, paano yung banga niya ay nasa baba. Pero kapag nakita mo daw na nakabuhat-buhat ni Brian Banga, parang pinagtitripan ka niya, parang ganyan na mga folklore or urban legends. So siguro yun yung mga nagpe-persist kasi in a way they're both scary, enjoy lang, saka at the same time yung luck na part, yung mga cockfighting beliefs, yeah, meron pang mga ganun, sir, na napapansin ako. So, dahil siguro sa wala namang harm, no? Wala namang necessarily science na kumakalaban sa kanila siguro. So kumakalaban sa kanila in a sense. Ayan.
Gusto ko lang siguro sabihin din na maganda rin ang methodology mo na ginamit sa counter mapping in order to somehow situate and also imagine what life would have been in the 1950s with the data that you have, no? So it can be purely speculative, but it is also based on certain kinds of data that a scholar like you and us, of course, would transform into narrative, no, na interpretation, no? Kasi iyon ang interesting sa mga scholars natin when we're presented with data that could not quite speak, then we do some kind of interpretation on how they grew, in the first place. So thank you for that, no, and also the use of emotions, no. May comments pa or Ito may tanong. Nabanggit po ng speaker na hindi siya taga Laguna. May similar folklores pa po ba sa kung saan po siya galing?
Kung ang tatanungin po ay recent, yung current period, I think wala. Pero sa historical data rin ng Ilocos, marami din ang tungkol sa kitchen, saka yung paninilbihan, parang common siya, no? Ah, Paninilbihan ng lalaki doon sa bahay ng babae, yung panliligaw na dapat uupo ka ganyan or kaya dapat nakaharap sa sunrise, wala ko masyadong nakaharap yung kumbaga stairs or yeah, doon sa east para sa sunrise ganyan. Wala akong masyadong nakita. Pero sa kitchen, yung gender related roles like yung babae dapat ganito mag-ayos sa kusina, yung placenta ng bata ilalagay doon sa ibabaon malapit sa kusina or sa bahay para magkaroon ng qualities na feminine or kaya masculine. Merong similarities din sa Ilocos. Sa Cordillera, yun pa hindi ko pa na-check, yung kanilang historical data account. Pero yun po yung limit ng paper na ito, nasa historical data papers lang siya. So, might as well check kasi meron din sa mga interesado siguro na mag-check. Yung H. Oatley Bayer, halos katabi lang din niya. Merong H. Oatley Bayer Ethnographic Collections. Meron ding for Tagalog region doon. So, pwedeng i-cross-reference. Pero so far, nung gumawa ako, for example, ng paper on weather belief, cultural history on weather belief, 1950s din, nagmamatch naman so far yung 1950s historical data papers sa H. Oatley Bayer. So if ever you are interested, pwede rin gamitin po yun as source.
Thank you. Definitely, I also urge others to investigate the Otley Bayer collection, no? Kasi they are snapshots of what happened in the past based on ground truthing and data gathering. No? So, in a sense, I should probably mention this towards the end of the whole lecture, but I also encourage everyone to become those kinds of scholars, no, to payabungin natin ang local histories, ang mga local na mga pangyayari, no, and write about them and document them, because someday they will become the basis for people to construct, you know, the worlds that we are inhabiting now. There's one question here, and thank you very much for this question. What can you say about the relation of Filipinos with folklore, especially the mentioned practices and beliefs in the house, knowing na mas prevalent ang Christianity sa Pilipinas? Hindi ba po against sa religion na ito na maniwala sa ibang spirits, lalo na kasi Christian nga? I'm curious of this contradiction in the beliefs of Filipinos, lalo na po mga matatanda na religious. Interesting din to, no? Yung contradictory space that it occupies of being both Christian and also embracing something pagan, no? I mean, kung pagan man, I'm just talking about, say, for example, in some areas that acknowledge Halloween, no? And then in a country like the Philippines, it's not practiced because of its pagan origin, yet for consumerist reasons, sa mga mall natin, madaming mga pumpkins, mga jack-o'-lanterns, mga scary outfits, because it's now traversing the realm of consumerism. Kasi siguro may mga ganong consumerism. Pero Ryan, baka may may ma-respondan dito. Tapos I'll call on Dr. Gutierrez.
Yes po. Parang ang dami kasing layers din sir na pwedeng pag-usapan sa folk Christianity. I mean, even not only folk Christianity but folk Islam, lalo na 'yan. Although siguro mas sensitive pero another topic siguro diyan. Pero folk Christianity sir, ang daming pwedeng layers pa na tingnan. Una diyan ay gaano ba talaga ino-observe ng Christians or believers ang religion sa kanyang outside the church, no? There were studies na accusing kumbaga yung Filipinos na outside the church, medyo iba na yung religiosity ng Pilipino. Hindi na na-apply kumbaga yung belief. Another one ay pwede rin nating tingnan as a combination, no, the syncretism between folklore at saka yung Christian belief. May mga pantheon of saints tayo. So, and the angels, the demons. So, I think doon pumapasok, pwedeng ipasok, no, ng ating mga ninuno, at least yung belief nila nagiging Christianized. So, yung belief system, tulad ng isang paper namin na aking kapatid sir ni Raydan Pawilen, so another LB prof, na Nightscape in Ilocos naman. So we look at the nightscapes, the creatures ng Ilocos, tapos nakita namin na nasa ini-incorporate talaga siya ng religion para maging example kumbaga kung gaano kalakas ang religious belief, like ito yung cross, ito yung panlaban sa mga ganitong old beliefs natin. So nabubuhay pa rin sa narrative kumbaga ng mga tao yung mga folklore na ito, kahit yun yung nilalabanan ng religion, kasi nagagamit sila as an example ng nilalabanan kumbaga ng belief system na yan. So yeah, very interesting na tapos yung sinabi mo sir kanina, consumerism, naalala ko yung last trip namin, although medyo iba na siguro to dun sa home, no, pero naalala ko yung last trip ko sa Thailand sir, last December, may Christmas songs na sila na Christian songs. So, parang nung nauna kong trip parang, sige kan lang 'to. Although acknowledge ang Christianity, hindi siya official na Christmas, event 'no, hindi siya official na holiday. Pero last December parang ba't may decorations na ng Christmas. So, puwede rin gano'n 'no, as I mentioned ko din kanina, merong mga prosesyon, merong mga piyesta. So, puwedeng magamit yung folklore 'no, sa presentations, et cetera. So, yeah.
Thank you. No, na-remember ko tuloy yung mga may isang singer na gosh, I'm forgetting her name, the famous Jewish singer, Barbara Streisand. She released an album in the 60s when she was really popular, Christmas song. Tapos, she's Jewish, and I think in my experience, you don't really say Merry Christmas to anyone, you just say Happy Holidays because it acknowledges that people, play Chanukah or kung ano-anong Kwanzaa na belief. No? Pero sa kanya, she knows that creating a Christmas album, even if she is not really practicing, I guess, Christian, kasi nga Jewish siya, also sells. No? So there's a consumerism part, and we should not really forget that. Isang quick lang na reaction before I call on Dr. Gutierrez. And I'm still glad that two of my students in Geography 173 are here, Jonah and Jules. Pero discuss din namin kasing Nightscape, no? Although ang sa amin naman, it's all about regulation, it's all about artificial illumination, and calculated invisibility as to bourgeois sensibility na sinong iniilawan, no? Pero yung sinasabi mo ko minsan na how the night is also incorporated with folklore, ay nako, ang rich sigurado niyan ng area na yan, that I encourage some of us to actually really focus on that, no, for whatever paper, to look at folklore related stories and narratives pertaining to night, no, or the nocturnal one. Ma'am Darlene, ikaw muna.
Okay. Thank you, Sir Joe, and thank you, Ryan, for that very interesting presentation. Meron lang akong gustong i-share na folkway, no? Na syempre within the house din yan ginagawa. Yung pag-aatang, I don't know if that is also practiced in Laguna, no? Kasi 'di ba, for every occasion na, kasi ito nakagisnan ko rin ito. Every occasion na nangyayari sa pamilya, for example, my birthday, 'di ba? Bago magsimula ang kainan, mag-aatang ka muna, 'di ba? I don't know if that is also siguro widely practiced din ito, no? In the country, no? And another is that I would like to, siguro naisip ko lang kanina na, ano kaya ang effect ng social media and also technology as a whole, no? Dito sa either preservation or forgetting, no? Or the non-practice of some of these folkways. Kasi nakikita rin natin na kuminsan may mga practices din na sinasabi ng ating mga elders na walang mawawala kung susundin mo. 'Di ba? Lalo na yung mga positive na mga practices, no? Which can also be considered as yung siguro mga mga practice na may explanation. Bakit natin ito ginagawa? Okay. So, yun lang na ano ko lang kanina, naisip ko lang while you were doing your presentation. Thank you.
Kung ano uli yung pag-aatang?
Yung bago ka magsimula ng kainan, kukuha ka muna ng kaunti sa bawat food that you are tag dito, yung sinisilbi mong pagkain. Kuha ka ng konti, ilagay mo sa isang lagayan, i-offer mo yan sa altar or sa isang place sa loob ng bahay. Yung iba nga nagsisindi pa ng kandila, nilalagyan pa ng tubig para sa spirits, no? Usually niyan, we offer them for yung spirits ng ating mga loved ones na nauna sa atin.
Yes po.
So, ano kaya na practice eh. I don't
Yes,
know if
ma'am.
that is also true, no?
Yes, ma'am.
In other
Thank
areas.
you, Ma'am Dar.
Mhm.
Sige, Ryan, do you want to respond?
Yes po. Yung pag-aatang po ay nakita ko, well, may practice din naman dito ngayon mo sa Ilocos. Nakita ko siya sa mga Ilocos Sur sa Ilocos Norte HDP. Pero nasa death part po siya kasi mostly. So I think doon talaga yung check ulit ma'am sa Laguna kasi possible na nasa death nga siyang aspeto kung meron man silang version ng atang. Tapos yung sa social media po, ang naalala ko po diyan ay paano maganda sana ring para magkaroon tayo ng shows na somehow nagiging historical cultural yung dating, like yung ginagawa ngayon ginagawa ng GMA. Kasi isa sa mga paborito kong Thai show for example ay yung Tong Ek. Isa siyang story siya ni Mario Morer. Tapos ang story ay isa siyang albularyo, parang young na albularyo ganyan sa Thailand. Tapos ang ganda ng pagkakagawa nila kasi habang ginagawa niya kumbaga yung mga medicine, nandun yung Thai words, nandun yung description, nandun yung saang book sa Thailand daw ito nanggaling, saan may kita. So inisip ko, pwede kaya to sa Pilipinas. Pero yun nga po, sabi niyo nga, dahil sa changes sa social media, dahil siguro rin sa epekto ng technology galing sa West or kaya yung perspective galing sa West, maaring hindi hindi siya tanggapin. Ewan ko. Hopefully hindi naman ganun ka negative yung pagtanggap if ever magiging socio-cultural historical yung gagamitin, ma'am.
Thank you, Ryan.
May tanong dito, did you also notice intermingling of these practices with other cultural groups? Like, for example, since these practices are related to the home, have you found in your initial data gathering some sort of interaction between Feng Shui and Filipino beliefs about the home?
Sadly po wala. Hindi po explicit din yung pagkakalagay sa HDP. Although may list ng original families, hindi po kasi nakalagay doon yung saan sila galing or ano yung ma-influences. So yun yung lacking doon sa part ng HDP. Pero interesting siya kasi may mga beliefs din, well, going another topic, another paper, yung historical cultural history naman ng weather beliefs sa Laguna. May mga Chinese, like kapag kumukulog daw, ang dahilan ng kulog at kidlat ay uumpugan yung mga bato, may lumalabas na maliliit na baboy. Tapos, para mahuli yung maliliit na baboy at makakuha ka ng anting-anting, dapat mahuli siya ng incheck, ganyan. So, ganun yung racial profile. Pero sa homes po, wala akong nakitang connection. At sadly, yung first family na list, kumbaga sa HDP, hindi rin kumpleto kung ito ba ay galing sa Chinese, may Chinese blood ba to or something. Pero interesting po, if ever.
Thank you. Baka yung iba may mga idadagdag sa tanong na yun, no? Kasi dito sa Philippines ay parang nagiging, hindi naman cultural norm, pero accepted talaga siya as something. At alam ko may mga scientific basis yun na may kinalaman sa geomancy, sa mga placement of energies, at saka aura, sa ganong klase. Pero nagpapakita lang siguro ng ano no, ng embrace natin, which is of course similar to the earlier question about yung the seeming tension between Christianity and yung mga beliefs sa mga spirits tsaka sa mga beings, no, na it seems na ano, reconcilable, kasi sabi nga ni Ryan kanina, minsan when you go to, when you do practices, it's one thing when you do rituals, related to the church, pero outside is quite different yung application mo, no, ng pagkaintindi mo sa mga ganun. Kasi parang tingin ko talaga ko minsan, sa organized religion in general, Catholicism man or any kinds of religion, parang tingin ko ritual talaga siya, no? Ritual na dinadaanan na kung minsan hindi na kino-question ang meaning sa atin, kundi yun nga, sabi nila, it defies scientific investigation, kasi nga faith, no? Paano mo explain yun? Parang hindi dapat. Yun.
Yes, if I may also add, sir. Parang pwedeng yung sa nagtanong po kanina si I think that was on folklore. Pwede ring tingnan yung yung perspective na nakita ng mga Americans on religiosity ng mga Filipino. Like sinasabi nila, may mga priest na sabi nila, pag dumating na yung Angelus, tahimik lahat ng Pilipino. Pero after that, tuloy ulit sa pagmamadyong, tuloy ulit sa cockfighting. Parang talagang as Sir Joseph said, yun yung maganda example. Yung ritualistic na siya, na ang religiosity ng Filipino ay rituals at ginagawa sa loob ng simbahan. Pero other than that, pagtapos na yung mga yan, balik sa social. Yun yung isang criticism ng mga Amerikano dati nung pumunta sila sa Pilipinas. So, ayun, pwede yung tingnan.
Kasi may sa anthropology, Ryan, no, may pag-aaral talaga sa performativities din, no, ang pagpunta sa church, mga ganun. So dapat wag rin siya i-dismiss, no, na ganun. Just because we know it's ritual doesn't mean na wala siyang meaning sa lives ng mga tao. Yun naman kasi importante, how it resonates, how you find yung mga meaning making ng mga yun. Thank you. May mga questions pa ba or comments? Siguro baka a few more, 1 or 2 more comments. Kamusta naman kaya ang mga folklore sa inyong mga lugar doon? Ay, Ryan, sige, please go ahead.
Yun, sir. Actually, may nagtanong din sa akin na siyante ko dyan kasi I think he was interested also in folklore. Sir, paano mo ginagamit yung folklore sa historical studies with the documents? Kasi siyempre folklore yan. Paano kung di nagmamatch like yung Kalamba? Ang folklore dyan ay Kalamba nga, pero may galing pala yan sa uri ng kahoy daw. Yun yung official na nasa papers. Pero ang sagot ko po dyan, I don't know if the other folklore researchers would agree. For oral traditions na societies, at least sa aking historical part, no, for oral tradition, for societies who adhere to oral tradition, tapos konti lang yung nakukuhang data or documents, minsan ginagamit ko ang folklore bilang worldview nga ng mga tao during that period, paano nila minimake sense yung kanilang reality. So, tinatanggap ko ang folklore pero hindi lahat. Parang kailangan mo siyang talagang i-process. Ano yung somehow, well, scientific, no, na pwede mong i-adapt doon sa paper. Like the origin of places, the practices, okay? Pero kung merong ibang sources like documents, archaeological findings, DNA analysis, etc. I think sa akin, ibabanggitin ko yung folklore pero I would still go for the documents. Well, that's my historical side. No? So yun po yung approach ko in case may mga ganong instances. Salamat, sir.
Kasi ang folklore, isa rin siyang data no? Oral man siya or embellished na siya, no? Na story later on, it's still data kasi nga it gives us an insight about how things were were the cultural logic during that time, no? And even the embellishment is also interesting. Maybe it's trying to be updated, to go with the times, so to speak, no? And those kinds of additions are all the more interesting to uncover. And I'm with you there, no? Na para bang folklore, hindi mo rin siya dapat i-ignore kasi they should become health, they should be in tension with tension, meaning that they are side by side with historical data. Pero like I'm glad also that you said that if you were to choose, you would choose the one historical data because that's something that was written, no? But also knowing that those were not necessarily also say factual, no? But it can be interpretations based on the subjective identities of those who write it, no? Pero napag-usapan na rin natin to, Ryan, no? On our own, pero yung mga bagong kaalaman ngayon dapat siguro isulat na rin because they might become future folklore. I know it sounds a little bit anachronistic to say future folklore, no? But true, no? It can become later on the canons that will define a new communities, no? Even with the advent of media, with the advent of newer scientific methodologies to understand the world better, nandiyan pa rin yun, no? At saka it enriches our understanding of ourselves and of the world, no? May questions pa ba? May isa ditong private lang na sa akin. I would just like to ask my or Ryan's thoughts how colonizers before in some Western countries called those who practice folkways as uncivilized. No? How can we prove to them that folklore, folkways, and the like just as important as data? Now, I have an opinion on that, but I defer to our speaker first.
Yung tanong, sir, ay how can we prove? Tama ba?
Thoughts lang, hindi naman prove. Pero para bang ipakita, kasi tinatawag nilang uncivilized, yung mga ganun, meaning lacking in scientific rigor, ganyan. And how can we prove to them that folklore is just as important? Parang pinapakita na, siguro sa worldview natin, it exists side by side, no? Or baka may opinion kung iba.
Siguro ang unahin ko dyan, Sir Icon, questioning muna yung definitions sa methodology ng Western. Kasi kapag naintindihan din natin kung saan sila nanggagaling at na-question natin at na-prove natin na may kulang doon sa, ito ay yung approach, sir, may kulang, may lacking, may discrimination na nangyayari doon sa methodology and perspective ng West on other kinds of knowledges na hindi sa kanila. I think doon pa lang napuprove na natin na kailangan ng alternative sources from the colonies or from the other parts of the world, kumbaga. As for the folklore, yun din naman yung same din yung sinabi ko po kanina na it's a kind of worldview. It's how a society makes sense sa kanilang mundo. So it doesn't matter if sa akin if it makes sense to the West or the sciences kasi ito yung perspective nila. Dapat tingnan mo din okay doon sa position muna nila bago yun nga i-judge sila as something na fake ganyan or something na hindi kapakipakinabang sa data. Okay. So yun sir yung sa akin.
Thank you. Siguro if I may just add my 2 cents to this thing kasi I was also asked about my opinion on this. Medyo pareho din sa iyo, no? Although I think you were a step further by saying that we should also analyze where they're coming from. That's smart and that's also at least a critical lens ng ginagamit sa pagtingin. Sa akin lang talaga in general, parang naalala ko yung singer na si Icelandic singer na si Björk, no? Where she always infuses her music with techno, sound and well recently kasi meron siya mga flutes ang ginagamit pero it seems like fairies and all other what we would usually call supernaturals coexist side by side with them. And if you uncover some of their folkloric traditions, you would see that there was never any attempt to explain them scientifically, no? Or at least may mga scientific din naman na community doon, pero it seems like it's always held in abeyance that folklore is totally different, no? And it's a different sphere, no? Na para bang hindi siya kailangan necessarily mag-undergo ng critical scrutiny, no? Which is not, of course, saying na walang critical scrutiny na ginagamit, pero parang may mga ganun sila. In the same way siguro sa mga Pilipinos, or at least na lang sa probinsya namin, ang pagsalita ng mga aswang, kasi itong kilala kong isang driver na palagi nakikinig sa mga aswang sa radyo pag nagde-drive siya ng taxi niya. Puro lahat pag pinapakinggan ko yung mga sulat, no, na tingin ko naman gawan to ng mga writers na lang dito, pero palagi sa Iloilo ang sinasabi na galing doon. So it's also reinforcing the stereotype, no, yung mga ganong klase. Pero really, it's that. By the way, may isang side comment lang ako. May isang nakilala ako, taga NCCA, no? National Commission on Culture and the Arts. Nagkwento lang siya sa akin na sa ano daw, sa kanang pag-aaral dati sa mga culture and heritage, no? Speaking of that, ang copies daw, no? Kasi usually parang may mga negative connotation sila. Aswang, mga kung ano. Gusto doon nila magkaroon ng aswang festival. Hindi ko alam kung gaano katotoo, pero ano to reliable source talaga to, tsaka first-hand information. So hindi to secondary information lang. Nagsabi sa akin na ginunk daw ng NCCA yon kasi parang sinasabi, much as we are open to that kind of thing, pero it seems like you might not be ready for the negative backlash it might happen, because if you think that will draw tourism, simultaneously it will also turn off people from coming to that, no? Ako, yung opinion ko doon na parang dapat NCCA wag kang maging cultural arbiter, no? Pabayaan mo kung anong gusto ng mga tao, nagsabi sila kanila na yon, no? Pero I guess we need gatekeepers.
So, di ba open na rin yung Pilipinas ngayon sa Halloween trick or treat? Baka pwede nang buhayin ulit yung project na yun, di ba? As in, sila yung center of Halloween trick or treat sa Pilipinas. Parang
Pwede nga nila i-transform into that, no? Na para bang version, no? Pero tawagin na lang nila na iba, no? Na ganun. Yun nga lang, kasi grabe din ang mga cultural appropriations ngayon Pati nga yung isa ring ritual doon sa amin, yung ati-atihan, tsaka dinagyang, no? Where they paint them sa, ano bang pinagkaiba nun sa blackface, di ba? Nung una. So medyo may konting po na in recent years about the cultural appropriation and what it means, no? So if you're doing that for performance or for a prize, what does it do also in terms of helping the very community or taking this kinds of things? Ang daming layers, no? Sa usapin ng folklore, no? At saka hindi pa nga natin fully na explore yung sa home din. Kasi or sa houses na lang pala. I don't want to presume it is home necessarily, no? Pero houses, infrastructures where people dwell, no? Or cohabit, no? So to speak. But thank you for that question, no? I think meron pa bang siguro last na lang bago tayo mag-wrap up ng ating discussion? Baka meron pa kayong questions or comments. Interesting din kasi, Ryan, yung data source mo, no? At saka I like it that you preface it by saying that it's just based on this, no? It can be interpreted differently. It might have a different picture altogether, but based on the facts that we have, and as an historian, just like the archaeologists with their own artifacts, I want to study this, no? And maybe posit certain kinds of scenarios, in the past. Kasi yun naman talagang jobs din ng historians, archaeologists, paleontologists, is reconstructing those kinds of practices and maybe enriching our own understanding of our culture, of our world, and how we go about with our placemaking activities, in our lives. But so wala na bang comments? Sige, Ryan, please.
yes po, isa yun talaga sa mga napansin ko rin kasi at least pangatlong beses ko na tong present aside from our class. Present ko rin siya as pero kung siya part of cultural writing, local history writing naman yung present ko yung data lang. Pero yung kumbaga every time I read it nga, iba yung interpretation ko. Yun yung nakita kong ewan ko kung limitations ba talaga ng pagbabasa ng emotions, pag-interpret ng emotions. Kasi every time na binabasa ko siya, parang hindi naman talaga siya negative. Parang ganyan yung feeling ko. So, mayroong ganong dynamics kumbaga pag pinag-aralan siya. Yun, sir.
Actually, may last comment dito, no? Ibasahin ko na lang. Pero pwedeng, parang food for thought na lang. Pero parang, ano kaya ang basis ng mga Chinese sa pag-assign ng Year of the Pig, the Rat, the Snake, etc.? May legend pa dyan, no? Kasi just wondering daw, no? Kung bakit nga may mga ganong animals, no? Actually, hindi ko rin question yun eh. Pero monkey kasi ako eh. Ewan ko, baka iba may mga comments or something. No. Anyway, kung wala man, it's something that we can probably think of. Pero ang galing na, no? Na parang more than human talagang representation. Pero may ina-assign silang traits sa bawat year, no? Na 12-year cycle, di ba? Anyway, kasi kami daw ng mga monkeys ay cantankerous, no? At saka deceiving. Pero smart naman daw. Parang binabawi.
Sir, side comment lang din. Dapat i-update na rin yung ganyang zodiac signs sa ka-signs kasi yung the changing times parang binabasa ko rin yung sa akin. Parang hindi naman. Hindi ako makarelate to eh. Anyway, side comment lang. Sorry.
Isa pa pala, yung kay Dante Ambrosio, anyone else is familiar. Pero Ryan, kasi ikaw historian, baka naman alam mo yung kanyang libro
Yung,
at saka yung Ethnoastronomy.
yes, sir. Kay Balatik. Sir.
Balatik.
Yes, sir.
Ano nga ba yun ulit? Parang a way of...
Mhm.
Go, sige.
Yes, sir. Orion's Belt, a way of, well, yung in some ways pang ginagamit siya to know direction as well as know paano the seasons, not necessarily concern, not necessarily the luck kumbaga or destiny of a person, pero nagtutugma rin siya sa historical data papers kasi isa sana sa papers ko sa inyo. Paano more on time at saka direction talaga siya, at saka yung weathers weathers climate yan. Pero hindi masyado sa hindi masyado sa destiny yung paggamit natin ng stars. Yan.
Parang walang katapusan tong conversation na to. Pero dati nung magkaroon tayo ng geography webinar din way back in pre-pandemic, I guess 2018 siguro, 2018, I'm pretty sure 2018, si Sarah Wright from the University of Newcastle sa Australia. She spoke about weather, no, and indigenous ways of looking at it. Pero ang natuwala ako doon, it's co-produced at saka yung knowledge nila doon para bang co-created, no, among the indigenous population she was studying. I forget the particular Aborigine group that she was looking at, no, kasi may mga county kasi yun eh. Pero may ganun daw, no, na may nakita sila na it's more about a kind of collective community way of understanding even weather, no. So knowledge is not just resting on one person who would just say, I know about how it's gonna go and I'll tell you the story about it, you know, because it comes from an elder. But this time it's really because people start to talk about it, and you know, there's a lot of checking, counter checking. I find it interesting, no. I guess parang ethnoclimate din siguro, no. Sige, kung wala na ba talagang last pahabol, okay naman kasi pwede naman tayong mag-wrap up na, no? 6:50. I guess, sige, we'll forge ahead. Teka lang, Ryan, hinanap ko lang yung aking script. Anyway, we are giving you a certificate of appreciation, and it's presented to Ryan Alvin Pawilen for the valuable insights and expertise shared as virtual resource speaker for the talk entitled Housing Culture and Emotions, a Counter Mapping Exercise with the Laguna Historical Data Papers 1950s for the Geography Webinar Colloquium Series given this 13th of October, signed by myself as the chair of the department and Assistant Professor Dominic Sasha Amorsolo, who is the Geography Webinar Colloquium Series Coordinator. No, sige. So, so thank you, Ryan. We will proceed with a few announcements before we end this session. No? We have a few more that's coming up on October 24. I know it's the reading break, right? But it's a Philippine Geographical Society lecture series, which is co-sponsored by the UP Department of Geography. One of our alumni, L.A. Di Mailig, Lawrence Anthony Di Mailig from the AHA Center based in Jakarta in Indonesia, is going to give a talk called Geographic Knowledge and Perspective in Humanitarian Work. And I spoke about this in my own class. So for those of you who were in that class, apologies for repeating what I said. But L.A. Di Mailig was one of those speakers I listened to in, I guess, 2016 when he was invited by the department to share his experience with humanitarian work for Typhoon Yolanda. No? His stories moved me to tears. I just remembered it distinctly. I don't even remember these very specific stories, but how he related them. And so when I asked him to give a talk, he said he's gonna talk about his own humanitarian work, both in the Philippines and in Southeast Asia. So stick around for that. And then for November, we have one November 29. It's at 4 p.m. It's a Tuesday. Understanding Tropical Manila, Climatic Studies of the Philippine Weather Bureau, 1900s and 1930s. Should be an interesting historical geography presentation. And rounding up our lecture series for 2022 is Professor Felipe Jocano Jr. from the UP Department of Anthropology, who's going to talk about our needs. And he calls his presentation, Have Sticks, Will Travel, Filipino Martial Arts and Mobilities. Walang question mark done. He was asking me what title he's going to give. So he was asking me, is this okay? And pero maganda rin may question mark, I guess. No. Yes, so those are what's coming up. Now, for those of you who are interested for our past lectures, you can watch the recording of this lecture as well as past sessions of both the Philippine Geographical Society lecture series and the Geography webinar at the UP Department of Geography YouTube channel. So you can also subscribe if you want to look at those archives that we have. And finally, well, not really finally, but just to give you a sense of what's coming up, we have the International Conference on Geographical Studies, November 10 to 11. It's focused on emotional geographies, passion in the geographical, and the deadline for the submission of your abstract is this coming Saturday. So yeah, so please do submit something for this conference. It will be international. It will be done remotely, and we only need 250 word abstract, 3 to 5 keywords, and yeah. So it should be an interesting one because it's about emotions, or mostly about emotions. You know? Okay, so yeah, more of the same.